We're here today at the Polk County Sheriff's Office where we're going to learn just how unique our fingerprints really make us. So sit back, relax, and join us on this science quest. Hey Bill, I'm here with Bill Thomas, the Identification Administrator at the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Welcome to the Polk County Sheriff's Office Identification Section. The Sheriff's Office Identification Section consists of basically two tasks, that is the identification technician and the latent print examiner. This section has some of the best, or should I say most proficient experts in the field of fingerprint identification. Consider this, there are 780 certified latent print examiners worldwide, and 3 of those examiners work here at the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Wow, that's impressive.
And the first 10-print latent examiner for the state of Florida also is employed here in the identification section. This section basically handles fingerprints when they come into the system, and also use those same fingerprints to identify or compare against fingerprints found at the scenes of crimes. That is our primary mission, to assist the deputies on the street and also the detectives in solving crime.
Oh, very cool. Well, shall we get started? How are fingerprints a science?
We talk about fingerprints as a science. Fingerprint identification is basically based on the friction skin. The friction skin on the palmar surface of the hand and feet is different from the skin on the rest of our bodies.
Now what's friction skin?
Friction skin is that rough and corrugated skin located on the palmar surface of your hand and the sole of your feet. Now, although the primary purpose of that skin is to make it possible for you to be able to grasp something or stand without slipping and falling, the side thing that's real beneficial from it is that no individuals have those ridge formations which is found on friction skin that will be the same between two individuals, which makes it then something that can be used for identification. It's an individualization organ, I guess, for the lack of a better term, that each individual has, and it makes each individual a individual within themselves, and they can be identified to that person and that person only.
Okay, so these fingerprints individualize everyone. You can identify anybody from these fingerprints. What does that look like on a smaller scale? Like, what's the structure, the makeup of this that allows it to be so individualized?
The friction skin itself
Pictures.
is actually structured, and it has 3 layers.
Okay.
It has the epidermis layer, it has the dermis layer, and that secondary layer from the dermis is actually the dermis papilla. Okay, located on this friction skin is ridges and furrows. Now, when I say ridges and furrows, to the average layman who can understand what I'm saying, it's like valleys and mountains.
Okay.
The ridges themselves being the mountains and the furrows being the valleys. Okay, these ridges then make different forms and shapes, and each individual forms and shapes are different. That's how an individual can be identified and individualized to that person and that person only. But it takes a trained person to be able to do that.
Now, you said that these ridges, these furrows, they form patterns. What type of patterns? I mean, are there just unlimited amounts, or are there specific types that you guys look for?
Well, there's 2 things that happens with fingerprints. One is classification. That is putting each individual in a specific classification, and that's when you're looking at the pattern types themselves. On the bulbs of the fingers, you're going to find patterns. And those patterns could be whorls, that's where your ridges are going in a circular motion, or it could be what we call a loop, and that's where the ridges flow up and out like a valley, or it can be an arch. So there's 3 basic patterns. The 3 basic patterns are whorls, arches, and loops. The pattern you see here is a loop pattern.
Okay.
There's 2 basic loops, one called a radial loop and an ulnar loop, and they're defined by which direction that these openings flow. One flows toward the ulnar bone in the hand, and one flows toward the radial bone in the hand. There's also arches. There's a plain arch and a tinted arch.
Okay.
The plain arch kind of just, the ridges flow in and flow out the other side. The tinted arch, the pattern or the prints go up and form a tint, like at a 90-degree angle.
Okay.
And then you have the whirl, and that's where your ridges actually flow in a circular motion, and those are called whirls. So there's 3 basic patterns. Now, when it comes to identification, we look at 2 different things. The first thing that happens is you look to make sure that the fingerprints that you're looking at possesses the same pattern between the known and unknown that you're looking at. The next thing you're going to look for is the individual characteristics, as we call them. The individual characteristics would be where a ridge flows and ends, or where you have one short ridge, or what we also call a dot. Now, in a dot, that would be a ridge that only has one pore.
Okay.
Okay. You would also have what we call bifurcations. That's where a ridge flows and splits into 2. You could also have a bridge and an enclosure. An enclosure is where that ridge flows, opens, and then closes in a very short distance. And that's what commonly known as an enclosure. Now, all the other ridge characteristics that we look for is basically a combination of those that I've also described.
Okay, so we've looked at the biology of the fingerprint. How do you apply all this? Where do you go from here? I mean, we know that they individualize everyone, but how do we look at it? How do we examine it?
The task in the identification section is basically twofold. One being, I have their identification technicians who basically handles 10 prints. And there's also latent print examiners who handle prints that are taken from the crime scene. What I'd like to do is take you out and have you meet Mike Boyette, who is an identification technician, and he can explain to you the portion of the 10 print side that the ID techs handle as they get the fingerprints from the booking station or the live scan machine.
Well, that'd be great. Let's go. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Real well, thank you.
Bill sent me over here, said you could show me some stuff about what you do with the fingerprints once you record them, once you get them and everything.
Yes, sir, sure can.
Awesome. Well, where should we get started?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about the initial process that takes place. Whenever someone is arrested within Polk County, they are taken to our booking facility located in Bartow. Once the detention staff receives that individual, they are then live scanned on one of our 3 live scan machines that we have in the facility. Once they are live scanned, their fingerprints are actually taken. It goes through what's called a QC, otherwise known as quality control.
Now, real quick, what's a live scan?
Live scan is an automated fingerprint machine in which the person is fingerprinted onto that machine.
Okay.
And then their fingerprints are forwarded over here to us where we can continue with the processing.
And is there any ink necessary for that, like you see in the movies?
No, sir, not for that particular machine, no.
Okay, cool.
So once they are initially live scanned, when it goes through the QC or quality control, what it does is the fingerprints are searched on the Florida State database of over 5 million prints, and then it will come back with 2 possible candidates that we have here. And then we will review those 2 candidates to see if one of the 2 are a match and to see if they have a previous history in the system.
Okay, so the only way that you can search for someone is if they're already in the system?
No, they don't necessarily have to be in the system. We can still search them, and then with the 2 candidates we'll determine whether or not one of the 2 are in fact an identification, and then or whether or not it's otherwise known as a non-ident.
Okay, so once it brings up 2 candidates and stuff, do you have to sit there and examine it yourself by eye, or does the computer help play a role, or what happens?
The only thing the computer does is to bring you 2 candidates. So
okay.
It is up to the examiner to review the candidates to determine if in fact one of the 2 are in fact a match.
All right, very cool. So this once they're scanned and they're brought into the thing, how does that deal with like evidence?
Well, it comes up here to the receiving screen once the quality control is done, and once we have the 2 candidates, we can then pull up the prints, and here we can see on the left portion side is the fingerprints of the individual that was arrested. Here on the right side is the fingerprints that is on file. We can then review the fingerprints, and the examiner will look at this fingerprint in much closer detail at the friction ridges specifically and at the unique characteristics. We first want to review the pattern type, being one of 3 types, arch, loop, or whorl. We can then begin looking at the friction ridges and means of the unique characteristics such as ending ridges, bifurcations. Those are ridges that start off as 1, fork off into 2. We can see the presence if there's dots, or even incipient ridges, which are ridges that are not yet quite fully formed. What we're looking at is we get a starting point and we attempt to locate those characteristics, but they must be in the same unit relationship. If they are in the same unit relationship, and we have seen that, then an identification has been made. However, if they are not, then the fingerprints do not belong to that same individual. But if it is the same individual, we would then go forward by clicking the ident button and then continuing the process.
So how long does this process take? I mean, I'm watching TV and CSI and stuff, and I see it takes 5 minutes, and they're set.
It depends on the quality of the print. If it's a fine quality that was rolled by the detention personnel, but it can take moments to look at and reference onto this side here.
Oh, very cool. So let's say you've matched them up. Where do you go from here?
Once we had checked this process, we then want to, if we made identification, we want to check our screen here with the Polk County Sheriff's Office, and we pull up their booking number that's been assigned to them. We want to look at their name, and then we compare it to what the name is on the state database. Okay. They are, once they've been identified, they are given a SID number, otherwise known as a state identification number. We will run that number in the state database and see what that pulls up. We want to confirm that the name is in fact the same. If the name is not the same and we know that the fingerprints were made by the same individual, we will then check to see if there's a possible warrant for that individual. We will look at that, and regardless if there is a warrant or not, if there is a warrant, we'll notify our booking sergeant immediately so that they're aware, so this person will not be released. We will then also notify them, reference an AKA form. We'll fill that out. The booking sergeant will be notified. That will be placed in that person's file, as well as the arresting officer, so that they know the person they arrested has a different name than what they've given them.
Okay, so you've entered them in the system and you've notified the booking agent if there's a warrant out for their arrest. Is that it? Are we finished with the process, or is there more to it?
No, there's still more of the final processing stage. What we want to do is called a second pass. Once we identified the individual and follow through with that, we submit the charges to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement located in the Tallahassee headquarters. That way that individual's charges will be placed on their criminal history. Once that has taken place, a fingerprint card will then print out with all their information on it, and on the back we have their charges. We will confirm that all the information is in fact correct. What we will do from there is we'll check to see if this person has had a previous arrest within Polk County. If they have, then that means they would have been assigned an index number. We'll check that index number. We will then compare these fingerprints associated with the index number to this name to confirm it is the same person. If it is, we'll then file those fingerprints associated with that index number, and then that way in later or actually in the future they can be used for latent identifications, things in regarding crimes that may occur.
So latent prints, what is that?
Those latent prints are prints that are taken usually from a crime scene. You may or may not have a possible candidate or suspect to look at, but anyway, if you do, we could use the fingerprints that we have on file if they think that they may belong to them and do a comparison. If not, the latent prints can be searched on various ways, and we have a person that would do that.
And who is that person?
Certified Latent Print Examiner Patty Newton.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to go see Patty then.
Yes, sir.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Hi, Patty. Mike sent me here to talk about latent fingerprints.
Hello.
So where do we get started?
Okay, well, to begin with, what he was showing you about the known prints are deliberately rolled.
Okay.
Deliberately, somebody's controlling a person's hand and they're rolling the fingers nail to nail on a corresponding background. Well, latent prints are different in the sense that they are basically touch prints. Unconsciously, we go through our day, every day, and we're touching things. And none of us take note of the ways that we do touch things, but you touch things with different pressure levels, you touch things to varying degrees. Latent prints are those touch prints.
Okay.
When deputies go out to a crime scene, they are going to collect oftentimes they're going to collect fingerprints, or crime scene technicians will collect fingerprints. What they do is they, on the field, they will black powder something and then they'll put tape over it, lift it, and put it on a piece of card.
Okay.
I'm going to show you an example of one of these cards. Here I am showing you an example of what we would actually pick up at a crime scene. This is a piece of palm.
Okay.
A palm print that's located on the bottom part of the palm, which is a place that people often would touch. And that print, it says on the back, was lifted from an exterior left-right door of a car, an Expedition. Here is an example of a latent fingerprint, which was lifted from an exterior rear cargo door of an automobile. Okay, that's what they would do. They would lift these prints and then they submit them to us, and sometimes they will give us names of suspects that they would like us to look at, and sometimes we would have to use our APHIS systems, which we'll talk about later. In comparing the prints, though, the way that we would compare these, say they gave me a suspect's name. I would go and find that person's fingerprint card on file, and then I would compare the latent prints to the known prints that are on file. And the way that I do this is I would lay the latent print beside the known print, which is on the card, and then I would start comparing features in those impressions.
Okay.
The first thing that I would do is that I would look to see if the orientations are right in both prints, the known print and the latent print. Okay, and then I would start looking for similarities between the two prints that are located in the same unit relationship.
Okay.
For an example, here on this blow-up, this is a chart that I would use in court if I was to go to court. And what they did is they took out little sections of each print located in the same unit relationships.
And sort of magnify just how they match up.
Yeah, and magnify how they match up. Of course, the latent print is going to be lighter because there again, it's not deliberately rolled, it's not made in a controlled environment, so it's going to be different. But then you can see that the features are very similar. Here we have a fork and another fork, and see they are the same distance from what we call the center or core of the print. They're the same distance, so it's the same unit relationship.
Okay.
And then the same thing's true for each of these other bubbles.
Very cool.
And then that is only for an example. There's probably hundreds of characteristics in both of these prints that I could show, but just for an example and to save time, we only pull out a few of those features.
All right, so you said, you talked about latent prints being gathered on the crime scene. Is it just on the crime scene, or do you also have to collect evidence and analyze it here?
They do collect the evidence at the crime scene. We will process evidence when we're asked to. Oftentimes what we process would be the smaller things, you know, because we couldn't obviously take a car into the lab and process it. So they would process that at the scene. What I would like to do is introduce you to Leggie Boone, who is one of the people that does the processing here at our office.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
great. Hi, Leggie.
Yes.
Patty sent me, she said you could show me how you guys process and sort of gather the fingerprints from evidence.
Yes. We develop our latent prints by a chemical process known as cyanoacrylate ester fuming.
That's a big word.
It's also known as superglue fuming.
Okay, much easier.
You may have seen it back in the 80s when Eddie Murphy did the movie Beverly Hills Cop.
Great movie.
Yes. Our crime scene investigators and police officers and deputy sheriffs will go out to crime scenes and collect evidence, something like an item that might be non-porous, which means there's no opportunity for anything to absorb through it.
Okay.
Those items the subject or victim or someone who shouldn't have been at the scene might have handled, and we try to develop latent prints on those items.
Okay, so non-porous. Obviously, it can't absorb any water and stuff. What type of materials are big examples of that?
Glass, or maybe a firearm, a bicycle, anything that's solid, that it won't be absorbing anything. It could be any surface, any electronics, or just about everything you can come across at a crime scene: a soda can, a beer bottle, any of those kind of items. Okay. I have one item here that's more of a before, as in we've touched it, but it has not been exposed to the chemical. And then I do have an example of how it appears after it's been processed, and the cyanoacrylate has adhered to the amino acids and fatty acids and all other minerals and other chemical components of the fingerprint. Okay. And it has a very, very light whitish coating over it, and we'll take that to another process to make it darker so that we can see it better.
Awesome. Okay, you've brought me to this vent room. You've made me put on gloves. What's the next step?
We're going to take the items that we had super glued in the other room, and we're going to add black powder to them so that we can see the prints a lot better. Okay. This will help the latent print examiner to do their job and try to match somebody's prints on file with the prints we're developing on this item here.
All right.
So here is one of the items that we've gotten prints on, and the other we brought back over. And I have here black powder. It's made from graphite and a few other minerals. And we use our fingerprint brush. This is what it looks like after a few uses. It doesn't take long to get it to look like this. I also use magnetic powder. It's a lot heavier if you want to hold that and compare it to this one. It's a lot heavier.
There's definitely a difference.
I like the magnetic powder better myself because it gets a little less spray, a lot less dirty. Okay, so if you want to try it with the magnetic wand, this wand here, it picks up all of that powder, and it's reusable to a certain extent, and you would move it across the surface of your item to try to find those prints. Once you find your print, you want to develop in the shape of a natural fingerprint, which is somewhat circular. Okay. So if you want to try that on...
I am terrible at this, it seems.
No, it just takes time and practice, just like everything else. If you want to go across the whole surface until you see something that stands out, then when you come across this at a crime scene or even in developing it at the with the super glue instrument, you want to do all sides of that item. So you can do both sides of it, and it's okay that we get it on the...
All right. So you do. Okay. Wow.
Looking pretty good on that side.
Yeah.
So whoever
I realized I was
handled
dusting,
that
I was
touched it
dusting
all
the wrong
over.
side of this.
Oh, no, it's no wrong side. And I do the same thing with the black powder, but it doesn't take very much with the black powder to start developing latent prints.
So this is great if it's, clear or white and whatnot, but what if it's black?
We can still use the black powder on black surfaces, on dark surfaces, or like electronics. And it does show in another, it is not as clear, but we also have white magnetic powder or other powders, different colors, reds, yellows, oranges, that we might use when we're doing other chemical processing. Once we lift that powder, once that impression off with our tape, we're going to put it onto a white surface. So it works out better to have the darker powders when we do the final process.
Okay, so we've dusted it, and you mentioned something about taking tape and lifting that off?
Correct. After we've made our print as clear as we can with our powders, we want to lift it so that it can be transferred to a latent print card. Okay. And that makes it a little bit easier for the latent print examiner, and we can also photograph it. I'll show you how to lift the print with our tape, and we'll put it onto the white cards. Knock off any excess powders, because that can clutter the actual lift and create a little bit of damage to the print. All right. Once you open up some tape, and you want to do a little bit more than what your surface coverage is. Lay it down on one end and smooth it across where your latent print is. Just slide your finger across. And you want to try to keep as few bubbles in the print as possible, so you can use your fingernail to try to smooth it. Okay. Because once it's covered by the tape, you're not going to damage that print. You're going to lift it from
this side?
That end, yes. And some people will take the print to the card, or take the tape to the card, or bring the card to the tape. I'm one who brings the card to the tape.
All right, I'm going to go with your method. Give it a try.
Okay.
All right.
Start from the base.
Start from the base.
Mm-hmm. Lay it down and then start smoothing it over with your thumb.
Like so.
Looks pretty good. Now you want to pull off a little bit more tape, and you can tear that off. The tape tears very easily. It looks really good. Now we would label this as to where it came from and who collected the prints and general case information on the opposite side so that it can be included in that case information, in their case report, and whatever happens to their case in the future.
And then this would go to the latent print examiner?
Correct.
All right, very cool. So this works really good for non-porous surfaces, but what about things like paper or cardboard, stuff like that?
There are some non-porous surfaces that will do well with magnetic powder, but we have chemical dyes that will do an even better job, like ninhydrin or DFO, which is a type of physical developer.
Who can I see to see that process?
We have Ms. Pam Holden, who's working with the ninhydrin today.
Awesome. Hi Pam, how's it going?
It's going good. How about you?
Not too bad. I was told that you could show me how you lift fingerprints off of porous surfaces.
Okay. First of all, a porous surfaces such as paper, cardboard, wood, and we're not really lifting the print off of the porous surface.
Okay.
We're making it where the print can actually be seen, such as this piece of paper here. This piece of paper looks like it does not have any prints on it.
Yeah.
But there can be prints which are called latent prints that are oftentimes undetected by just looking at it. And you can use a chemical process such as ninhydrin to bring the print out. This is liquid ninhydrin, which we normally use for multiple pieces of evidence, porous evidence.
Okay.
However, you can use it for a single piece as well. And so I'm going to pour some into the Pyrex dish.
All right.
Okay, just enough for the evidence and put it in there, and you can use the tongs to take that out.
Okay. So do I go ahead and take it out?
You can go ahead and take it out and let it kind of hang there and drip off the excess for a little bit. And once that has occurred, you can lay it on the paper.
Okay, so is it good?
That's good.
All right.
And we let it dry there. And if necessary, we can take and put it in the little cubes over there once it's dry.
Okay.
It normally takes about 24 to 48 hours for the prints to really develop, and you will see a purple.
Right.
You may begin to see some prints, a little purplish color in a few minutes, but you really have to let it continue to develop in order to see. Today, we do have a sample of where prints were developed on an item, and this is what they will look like once the 24 hours to 48 hours have elapsed. You see the nice purple color there, and the fingerprints, and a little bit of a palm print down there. And that is basically ninhydrin, the ninhydrin process.
Very cool. All right, so I'm a little curious. Why is it only the fingerprints turn purple? Why not the whole paper?
The ninhydrin reacts to the amino acids that are deposited from a person's skin, and it's my understanding that paper does not have those amino acids, so therefore it would not react with all of the papers, only where the person is actually touched, and they've left the residue there.
Very cool. Okay, so we've got some evidence that needs photographed. This is where you take over, right, Ian?
Yes, this is forensic imaging.
Okay, and what's the process?
Okay, basically we start with an exhibit. I have a sample exhibit right here. Most of the exhibits that we photograph are to do with fingerprints in here. Occasionally we do shoe prints. This is a piece of adhesive tape, and it has some visual marks on. That is marks which haven't been processed in any way. They're just marks from either a sticky or dirty finger that someone's touched. It's clear tape, and it's quite hard to see the marks, so we're going to use photographic techniques, and then we're going to download the image and process them to bring up the fingerprints.
Okay. All right. So we have the tape. So how do we set it up on
Okay.
to get these images?
Okay, I'm going to put the tape over here on this light box and frame it and focus it. I've already set the exposure, and there we are.
What are the filters that you would use?
One of the common ones that we would use would be just a simple green filter for ninhydrin.
Okay.
Ninhydrin's a purple mark, typically on paper. Sometimes those marks are quite weak, and we would use a green filter to enhance them.
All right, so you take the picture, and then this is sent where?
Okay, what I would do is I would take the media out of the camera, and I would upload that onto one of our computers,
Okay.
which I could then look at the images and process the images. Well, now we've downloaded it to the computer. We're going to open the file of the photograph that we've just taken. So this is the original image, or a copy of it, as we've downloaded it. You can see fingerprints on there, but they're not particularly easy to see. They're not very contrasty. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Photoshop to enhance those images. Normally when we're looking at fingerprints, we look at a black image on a white background. Although we've got the photograph here of the fingerprints, it's not very easy to see, it's not very contrasty, and it's not black and white, it's in color. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the image to a grayscale image, which gets rid of all of the color.
Okay.
And then I'm going to improve the contrast and the tone. And finally, for this particular image, I'm going to do something called an equalization.
Oh, wow.
And then we end up with a nice black and white image that we can see. We can zoom in and look at either one of these fingerprints. We've got something there now that an examiner can compare.
Okay, so these images are then taken and compared to the known, the one that they take?
Yeah, I would photograph this and I would pass it to Bill or to whichever examiner had requested it to be photographed for them to compare with whatever they have.
Hello, Dorothy. We've got all these digital images now of these fingerprints. What do we do with them?
Once the images have been enhanced, we'll then search them in our local database, APHIS here, or our national database, state database, APHIS over here, or our national database. And each system operates basically on the same principle, with some factors being different. Our local database, you can search a fingerprint as well as a palm print in the system.
Okay.
Our state database, you can only search fingerprints as of now in that system. And these databases have a suppository of a large amount of fingerprint cards that are in them. The national database, it can search fingerprints as well as it has the ability to search court files and documents. You can search wanted personnels. You can search sex offenders. You can search known or suspected terrorists in this file system. This system also has the capability of searching mugshots. You can also search for tattoos, scars, marks, any kind of enhancement that may have been on a person's body. In 2014, the national database will have the capability of facial recognition, iris scan the retina. You'll also have a search capacity that will be faster than we have now, where when we initially started, it would take from 2 to 3 days to get a response back for a submission that was sent off. Now we're down to hours in a response for our submission.
All right, so I'm seeing that technology, obviously, it's advancing a lot. The databases are getting faster. We're getting a lot more that they're capable of. Is there anything that officers can use, like on site, or does it all have to be just right here? This is the only place they can do it. Is there anything?
Yes, we have Rapid ID, which can be tied to the nation's database. When an officer on scene submits a search, it will go straight through the national database. It will send off a search. That search will come back with the hit, no hit, or ambiguous, and it will also supply that officer with all the other information that the system is capable of searching. It won't just search the fingerprint files, it'll search every file there is and submit that information directly to the officer at the scene.
Very cool. Bill, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. It has been phenomenal.
We were glad to have you, and I hope that you have learned something about fingerprint and fingerprint identification, and that you know and can see that fingerprints is definitely a science.
Well, that it is. Well, I can now guarantee that my mom has always been right. I am unique. Anyways, that's all we have for today. Join us next time as we seek out yet another science quest.